How's it going at RSU? We already missed you, and it's only been a couple of days since we've been together when we gathered on Saturday. So for most of you guys who have been coming to RSU consistently, you know that we are in this series called One Body, One Church. And because of Jesus, we have been reconciled back to the Father. So we've been looking at what does it look like to be this reconciler within the body, reuniting people with other people and reuniting people with God, because that is our mission as Christians, and those of us who are a part of the body is to act like Christ has, and we see that through his example of reconciling us to the Father, that we too must be reconcilers. So this past Saturday, we talked about how reconcilers are a winner of people. We went through Paul's writing to the Corinthian church in chapter 9, verses 19 through 23. He made all these different types of connections with these different types of people: the religious, the non-religious, the moral, the immoral, for the purpose of connecting them to God, right? Restoring this relationship that has been broken ever since the fall. But there's some beautiful things that he says in the midst of it. He says that he doesn't lose sight or lose reign of Christ in the process, meaning that he's not losing his identity and who he is in the process, but he stands firm to who he is. He still makes these connections with these individuals for the purpose of connecting them to Christ. One of the passages that I've been thinking through and meditating on ever since Saturday is this passage in Luke 19. In this particular passage, there's a couple of things that stand out to me about Jesus. Now, Paul writes in 2 Corinthians that Jesus is the prime example of what it means to be a reconciler. And we see these examples all throughout the Gospels. Jesus continuously reconciling people back to God and reconciling people to people, right? So what we see within this story is that Jesus encounters this man by the name of Zacchaeus. And the story tells us that Zacchaeus is a tax collector. Now, a tax collector wasn't a job that you wanted back then. It was a job that people despised you of, especially the Jewish people, right? If you were a Jewish individual, Jewish people would hate you, because what tax collectors would normally do back then is that they would up the prices on the taxes in order to benefit, right? The Bible specifically says that Zacchaeus was not only a tax collector, but he was rich. And the reason why he was rich is because he was stealing from his own people. So that made him essentially one of the most hated people in that particular time, because he was stealing from his own people. He was crooked, right? And so Zacchaeus is on this sycamore tree, and Jesus stops and points out Zacchaeus, and he says, "Yo, Zacchaeus, I want to have dinner at your spot tonight," right? And Zacchaeus gets all giddy and he gets all happy about this. Now, this causes the crowds to be very, very upset. The text says that the crowd grumbles at the fact that Jesus is making this decision. Now, Jesus and Zacchaeus are polar opposite. Jesus is this poor rabbi, and Zacchaeus is this rich tax collector. And at this time, Jesus has this huge following, and Zacchaeus, he probably doesn't have much friends besides other tax collectors, right? So these polar opposite individuals who should not necessarily be friends or befriending one another. But what we see is that Jesus is taking the opportunity to slow down and befriend this individual that nobody else would probably take the time to befriend, right? And not only does he do that, but he invites himself into the home of Zacchaeus. Now, this is Jesus attempting to befriend and be in close proximity with Zacchaeus, and it works, because we see that Zacchaeus actually allows Jesus to be in his home. Now, the text actually takes a little bit of almost like a fast forwarding, because between verses 7 and 8, we see that there is this huge drastic change that happens. Zacchaeus, who was once this crooked tax collector, now becomes this individual who is extremely zealous about repaying what he has essentially stolen to people and even giving his goods. right? And Luke doesn't give us much insight about what happened between verses 7 and 8, but we can only just imagine that there is some healthy conversations or these beautiful things that are taking place within this meeting between Zacchaeus and Jesus. As Zacchaeus is making this decision to right his wrongs, we can only imagine all of the people that he is reconciling himself back to, right? Through the small interaction with Jesus, we see that Zacchaeus' heart has changed and he begins to see his own corruption and what he has done to his people, right? So what we see is that Zacchaeus is now zealous to repay his wrongs with giving away goods from his own collection, right? Or the things that he has collected, repaying the people that he has robbed and has been corrupt to. All these broken relationships because of his sins are now being mended again because of his repentance. And here's the beautiful thing. The only thing from the time that Zacchaeus has seen Jesus from that sycamore tree to the point in which he ends up repenting, the only difference in between is the fact that he encountered Jesus. Right? Zacchaeus encounters Jesus, and we see that there is this huge change that happens in the heart of Zacchaeus. Now, we don't get the privilege to see in the book of Luke exactly the words that has been exchanged to Zacchaeus, but here's what we can assume. That Jesus wasn't there spending his time just arguing and bickering, going back and forth with Zacchaeus, proving his knowledge, proving that he is right. Because ultimately, if you've ever tried to do that with any individual, how many times have you seen that actually work? When you've just bickered and went back and forth and back and forth. No, I think we have to believe that in that conversation between Jesus and Zacchaeus, that there was a lot of listening coming from Jesus. That there was a lot of being slow to speak that was coming from Jesus. Hearing from Zacchaeus. Maybe there was some hurt. Maybe there were some things that has gone on in Zacchaeus' life that caused him to be in that particular occupation. I mean, we don't know, but what we see is that there is this drastic change in the character and in the heart of Zacchaeus, right? So I think what Luke is essentially trying to have us see with this story is that there is a different way in which Jesus is holding himself as a reconciler than most individuals in that society. Not being condemning, but opening up. Not conforming to Zacchaeus' way or maybe his ideology, but standing firm on what he believed and being gracious and being kind, being a good listener, loving, embracing. There was obviously some huge differences between Zacchaeus and Jesus and their lifestyles. But Jesus opened himself up to be able to have a relationship with Zacchaeus, and we see the change. Zacchaeus is a new person. He is this new creature. He is now reconciled to other people, but now he's also reconciled to God. Jesus says that Zacchaeus now has salvation. He has been saved. So we see that not only his relationship with other people have been reconciled, but now his relationship with God has been reconciled, right? And we see that Jesus, he plays as the primary reconciler here, connecting Zacchaeus back to the rest of humanity and connecting Zacchaeus back to his creator, right? So as we all go about our individual days and as we are in these different spaces, and I want to encourage you guys to continue to walk in the way of a reconciler. Fam, I love you and I can't wait till we come back together. Until then, be safe, and I'll see you guys on October 24th for our next RSU gathering. Peace.